Hi everyone, my name is Taryn with Quest, and today's webinar is PeopleSoft HCM Configuration Series, Page Composer for Approvals, and today's speakers is Jeremy and Shawn with Oracle. So a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attending lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout this session. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put those into the question drop-down box. We'll answer those at the end of today's session, and this is being recorded and it will be on the Quest Content Library, and everyone will receive an email when that is available. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy and he's going to get things started.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Okay, so my name is Jeremy Pelley. I am a PeopleSoft Strategy Director within Oracle, and my primary responsibilities fall under the HCM space and ELM space. And so I'm on the functional side of the house within the development organization. And my role really is to work with customers on a day-to-day basis and work with development to bridge that gap between our customers and development and make sure that we're delivering the right things that are useful to our customers. And then Shawn, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, Shawn Abernathy. I manage our Common Application Products team, which is also called Enterprise Components. Is made up of AWE or approvals, fluid approvals, everything else related to approvals, Page Composer, events and notifications, the list goes on and on. And I guess I'll end there.
Okay, great. So we want to welcome, no problem. So we want to welcome everyone today. And originally, I guess I noticed I forgot to change the date on this slide. Originally, this series was scheduled back in May, but we had to postpone until today. So hopefully everybody is able to still join. Here's our safe harbor statement. Basically, everything we're going to be talking about for the most part, and I believe maybe everything, is currently available and generally available within the tool set that is out there. If there's anything that we talk about that is future facing or roadmap facing, we will identify that at the time that we talk about that. But just understand that if something is on our roadmap or is in the future, that the timing of that is subject to change if and when things within our environment change, such as current events that we are all under kind of changes and flips our priorities on their head. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So hopefully everybody that's joined or everyone that's listening in is here for the same reason, and that's to talk about Page Composer. So we're going to talk about what Page Composer is. We're going to talk a little bit about Fluid Approval overview, just for kind of what Fluid Approvals is, because that's what Page Composer is built for. We're going to talk about the kind of Page Composer layouts, buttons, links, things like that, and registrations, and where to get more information. I'll show a demo from the functional side as far as what that super user may be able to do. And then Shawn's going to talk, and he's going to go over the more technical sides. We may interject here and there between each other, especially Shawn interjecting with me, but we will have that discussion. Shawn is more on the technical side, so he'll be able to answer those technical questions. We'll have time at the end for questions, and we should have plenty of time, to be honest with you. So any questions that you have, you can add them to the chat or the questions area, or I'm sure that Taryn at the end will let us know how we're going to do questions, but we're going to do them at the end. All right, so what is Page Composer? Okay, so Page Composer allows for you, the customer, not Oracle, but for you, the customer, to design the content and layout of the PeopleSoft Fluid Approval pages based on your needs and without customization. And that's the big part of that, right? It's that you can change these layouts and you can change these designs, and they're not customizations. What's important to note is that it is multi-instance aware. So if you are in a clustered environment, for example, it works across the environments. It is part of Enterprise Components, which Shawn mentioned that that's the team that he manages. And so as part of Enterprise Components, it goes across all of our PeopleSoft databases, including financials, ELM, CRM. It allows you to do drag and drop of fields right through the PIA interface. So right on the web interface, without having to go into App Designer, And so it actually gives the ability that if your organization allows it, to have a super user, like maybe somebody in HRIS, or somebody that is not as technical, to actually be able to do these layouts. That doesn't mean that they don't have to work with their technical team. There's things that they may need to have and work with their technical team to be able to register new records and things like that, to make them available. And Shawn's going to talk to us about that. But once those things are available, the dragging, the dropping, the moving, those aspects of the page and the setting up the page can definitely be done by somebody that's not as technical. Keeping page layouts during image uptakes. So your page layouts, you can keep those as you uptake our images. And oftentimes we deliver a default page layout whenever we deliver a new feature. So when we go in and I show you the demo, we're going to look at absence management actually as our demo. And you're going to see that we actually deliver a page composer template out there, or layout out there for you. And that's a good starting place. And then if you want to modify it from there, you can. And we're going to talk about that. Ability to add custom content. So if you register custom records and stuff and you make it available, then you can then add that custom content in. And then application data sets. If you're familiar with application data sets, this allows you to move move from test to dev. So you can make these changes and test them in your test environment, and then be able to move those up to production or across any of your databases using application data sets. Okay. High-level activities. So this is where I was saying that you have some things that you still have to have a technical resource or PeopleSoft developer for, and then you have the designer, which could be more functional, and then ultimately the user. So development and registering is still part of the development lifecycle, and it still is something that oftentimes a PeopleSoft developer is going to work with a functional user or analyst to get those requirements, understand what is needed, and then actually develop and do the registration of the components. And those terms we're going to talk about a little bit more whenever Shawn talks. As far as composing that's more of a designer role, and the designer role may be an analyst that works in IT. It may be a business analyst, so it could be a application analyst that's in your IT department, or it could be a business analyst that's in your HR, IT, HRIS department. And then the running of it falls on the user. Shawn, did you want to add anything here?
No, I think you're right. I'll just cover it when I go through the registration piece.
Great. So from an architecture standpoint, just so you understand where Page Composer kind of lives within the architecture, Page Composer sits basically right beside the application logic and the application page fields. And it has reserved page fields for Page Composer, and it runs at runtime. And so the good thing to note here, even though to a non-technical person this is going to be a little bit overhead, but for a technical person, the good thing to note is that this is running in real time, right? So if I make a change, I don't have to go and there's no compiling that happens. There's nothing like that happens. I can make a change and then I can go directly to the page and I can view that change on that page. And so anything that I make and do changes from the Page Composer standpoint can actually be seen real time. Okay. So application data sets, we talked about this. There's not a lot to say here. ADS can be used to migrate Page Composer data between test and production environments. There is an enhanced data migration workbench that allows you to customize compare for Page Composer. And there's two views that's available. There's a column format that supports Page Composer layouts, and there's an HTML format. And Shawn, if you want to step in and explain any of this, this is the column compare.
Yeah, so what we had to do with Page Composer, because the data was there's so much data compared to normal application data sets, and the layout was formatted. It's formatted differently. The two views that we offer is this 2-column HTML. So you're getting a look and feel of kind of how we're mapping the bind variables and what you're dragging and dropping. And so it's more of the data that you're using type of compare versus if the source text version, which is and I didn't actually grab a snapshot of this, it looks like a PeopleSoft when you're doing a compare between two databases or a project compare between file and your database. The layout is a little bit different. And so when we came to the conclusion that this 2-column layout was a little bit more readable, that's when we decided that we needed to have both options available.
Okay, great.
Go ahead. I don't have anything else, Jeremy. You can keep going.
Perfect. So Fluid Approval Components. So the Page Composer works with Fluid Approval, and that's what it was designed for. That's the starting place for Page Composer. That's not to say that Page Composer won't eventually or one day be used for more than approval components, but today that's what Page Composer is for. And so we want to talk about the Fluid Approval piece. So in order to do what we're talking about, you need to be on Fluid, and you need to be using the Fluid Approval component. So 3 pages with Page Composer define sections. You have in Fluid, you have the summary, you have the header detail, and you have the line detail. And the line detail is not used on everything. So there are certain transactions that don't necessarily have line level detail. If I've seen everything correctly, but a lot of things.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I think time and labor, the only one in HCM, is that right?
Time and labor, yes, is the only one.
Yeah. So most of your changes a lot of times are going to happen at the summary and the header detail, and we're going to talk more about the header detail whenever we get in there. Consistent layout, so users' experience is familiar between transactions. The other thing that I'll mention here is that this is the large form factor, but Fluid Page Composer allows you to set up these sections to be different based on the form factor that you have, and we're going to see that. But on a large form factor like a desktop, laptop type computer, you obviously have more screen space, you have more real estate, whereas on a phone you have less real estate. So you may want to have not as much information. You may want the labels to be shorter. Instead of absence name, you may just say name. Instead of start date, you may just say date. Things like that. But you may use our shorter labels if you're on a small form factor device. But this kind of points out the actual sections, and this is the absence request that we're actually going to look at. Okay. So that being said, let's jump over. Here, and of course my environment timed out. Okay, great. So first thing I want to touch on is approvals themselves. So let's click on the approvals tab just so that you can see, if you're not familiar with Fluid approvals, you'll see where the approvals actually is. And so the approvals tile takes you to a single place, and I'm in an HCM only database. If you were in a database that included financials, clustered environment, or included ELM, you would have multiple approvals that you would see. And you would have the option to view as a manager all your approvals in a single place, or you could have your approvals broken down by the type of approval. So you have absence requests, cancel absences, performance approvals. If you had learning, you would have learning. If you had expenses, you would have expenses. The database that I'm in right now is only HR, so all we see are the HR approvals. So I'm going to click on absence requests, and for the sake of this is where our demo is going to be, is I'm going to look at the absence ones, but let's click on this Christelle Stevenson absence request. You can see that just as you saw in the page shot that we had, it's made up of these sections, and this is the header section. And so here is the details of the absent. You have the absence name is vacation, start date, everything. Just this is how we deliver it out of the box. Okay, so there may be things you want to change. There may be other details that you want to add to here, and that's where Page Composer comes in. So let's go to Page Composer. Sorry, every now and then I may have to look at my notes. So Page Composer is under Enterprise Components. And
so one thing to point out here as Jeremy's navigating to the page, we did actually deliver 2 tiles for Page Composer to modify the layout and then also to do the administration. They're not active, with any of the delivered. I keep trying to blank on the name, but on any of the home pages. But you can come back and add them. It should all be in PeopleBooks. So
so I was
just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I was even unaware of that. So there are tiles that are delivered that aren't actively on a home page, but if you are using Page Composer, you can add those tiles if you have a home page, like a configuration home page or a home page that you've created for the staff that may need this. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. So here under Enterprise Components, it's Page Composer. The definition, since we only have approvals right now, the only definition out there is approvals. And then we're going to look at the object type of component. Okay. And then we would search. And then you see the different components that are available to you to make changes. So we are going to go to Absence Management. Oh, there it is. Yep. All right. And so here you can see the approval summary. Here is the header detail, which is the main thing that you see whenever we logged in and saw that approval. And once you're on the which one you want, the approval, the header detail, or the line detail, you can click on your toolbox. And here's where you can see that the form factor is available, and then you have different things that you can do here. Let's first talk about the form factor. So as soon as I come in, we deliver the extra large form factor for you, but there's other form factors that if you may want to change. So the extra large being for the desktop, the small being for the phone, for example. So I don't have a phone hooked up to this webinar, so any changes we make, we're going to make to the extra large one. But you can see that on the phone, it puts it in a single column format rather than the double column format. And so you can also make changes to this format as well. So if you're wanting to make changes that are reflective on both formats, you're going to have to make them to both formats. Okay. And there are large and medium formats as well. But the extra large format is the one that we're going to look at because anything that I show you or change, since I'm on a computer, that's where the changes are going to happen. So here is what we deliver. And so you can see that these are the items that are on the page that when we looked at that approval, you see absence name, start date, original begin date, partial days. You have the ability to style this. So for example, if I wanted to make the start date to be a different color, I can have that to be red. Okay, and then maybe I want to make my current balance bolded. Okay, all right, and I can do that to the label as well if I wanted to. So anyways, then I can save that. Done. And then I'm going to come back in here, but for the sake of this, let's yeah, I can just open a new window. I want to show that just by making that change, I can come back to approvals, click on absence request, go back to Christelle Stevenson, and well, did I not save it? Hold on. Make sure that I did what I said I was going to do. Okay, done. Oh, go ahead.
No. I'm trying to figure out what you did as well.
Okay, I hit save.
Maybe it didn't save.
I was going to say I did this right beforehand and I didn't have it worked fine. So okay, yeah, I don't think I hit save. All right, so here my start date is now red and my current balance is bolded. Okay, and so very simply I can do things that that beforehand I would have had to have done in App Designer or had written code to do. I also have the ability to add fields, and so I'm going to come in here, and this may not make total and complete sense as far as the fields that I'm adding, but we're going to add let's see. Try to look at my notes as to what field I added. Absence type in country. Okay, so country. So I have the ability. I can come and I can drag and I can drop the field. And then let's add absence type. So any fields that are available to this section can be added. If a field is not available to this section, I try to add it, it won't let you add it. Okay. Once I add the fields, I need to come in and edit this section, and I need to give the fields a label. So if I just add them on here and I click save, then I'm just going to see them kind of hanging out with no label. So I need to tell it if I want to have them to have a label. And so for country, I'm going to say country, and for absence type, I do a long description for absence type. Okay, so you can choose between those. And again, if I want to style it, I could say the absence type is bolded, and let's make it dark green, although dark green doesn't really show up very well. Okay, and then I can go here, I can save, and then I'm going to come back here. Back into Christel Stevenson, and I can see that I've now added country and I've added the absence type. Again, these may not make perfect sense as to why I would add these, but it gives the idea that I can add a field and I can have the label be what I want it to be, and I can change the color if that is so as I desire. Now, once I've come in here, once I've done this, if I come back to Page Composer and I decide, you know what, it really doesn't make sense to have absent type in here, I can always take these, drag them up here to the trash can, and remove them. You get it just right. There it goes. Okay, and then I can save, and that's how you delete things. Same thing I can do with the small form factor. It's just a simple drag drop and then edit as you would like. Okay. All right, that's the main thing that I wanted to show. Let's go back to PowerPoint. All right, Shawn, did you want to take over from here?
Yeah, just 1 second. Okay, so I'll read through this slide and then I'll probably do a demo of the registration as well. So the Page Composer registration that we deliver with Fluid Approvals, it covers all of the approvals, or almost all of the approvals that are delivered, by Oracle. You also have the ability to add your own. The key thing here, so if you have a custom approval that you want to add to Page Composer and Fluid Approvals, so it shows up on the tile. And we're not going to walk through all the Fluid Approval side, but the Page Composer registration side, as far as defining a Page Composer allows single type registration and then composition type registration. So approvals is one of those composition type registrations where you're going to have multiples based on a key within the parent transaction. So in this case, it's the approval transaction name. But as you're registering with Page Composer, any record that you add to Page Composer or to have lookups should include all of your transaction keys. So from an HCM standpoint, that's the employee ID, employee record, say the absence request ID, start and end dates. I run kind of a large range as far as how many keys there are. In financials, it can pretty much be the business unit and say requisition ID or expense ID or sheet ID, whichever the different keys are there. If you don't include the keys and we try and map to those key values, you'll end up getting errors as you're going through and testing things out at runtime in your test environment. So the work record part here is really more around buttons, where we're not going to query and retrieve results for display purposes. And then the last thing to note here is definitely want to keep things as simple as possible. Databases have gotten better as far as how they optimize complex joins and large views. But if you end up with a view that does a full table scan and you are in a clustered environment where you're pulling from HCM, campus solutions, enterprise learning, it will eventually time out. So as much as we want to say we can support any range of complexity in your view, the simpler the better. That's just that's our common practice right now. Next slide, and I think it might be the demo slide. Oh, yeah, and this one I'll bring up in a demo, but it's good to just note these. This is everything that we would allow you to configure and change the labels on. I know it's kind of hard to read, but if you remember a few slides ago where we had a red box with a name attached to it as far as EP, EOPC, object name, something or other, all of that maps to what is used inside of the Page Composer registration. So as you're defining your this section name, so in the first case, it's the transaction approval summary. That's the title that we'll use. It's on the page, the result. It's on the results page when you're doing a search, or not a search, but when you come into the fluid approvals tile, and then again, some of the EOPC objects that we're leveraging in order to display that page on fluid approvals. So again, probably not enough time to go through the whole fluid approval construction of that component, but the fluid approvals leverages the Page Composer fields, and then we expose those through Page Composer registration so that you can link the two together. All right, good. I have another slide.
You don't. So let me stop sharing, and I'll change presenters to you, Shawn.
Okay. And just so you can get, I don't think anyone wants to see my whole. Let's share Firefox. Okay, and I can see what I'm sharing. So just as Jeremy pointed out with the absence request, we see that here. So now on the Page Composer registration side, that's where I need to hide just one window. There we go. Again, it exists as a tile. It's just not one that's active by default. But I'll still go through the menu. So enterprise components, Page Composer administrator is where we're going to do our developer registration. Inside of here, we also talked about the ability to leverage application data sets. So we have a link here to call into the data mover, or not data mover, application data sets pages, and you would just select the page composer registration or the page EOPC application data set. So for now, let's focus on the developer registration. And also, I know kind of a small thorn on my side, as well as everyone else, that we don't default to approval since that's the only thing we have. And looking into that. So if you had your own custom approval, you could come in, you can either modify any of the existing approval components that we deliver. You could also add your own approval type. This would essentially prompt you as you go through and save. Actually, you edit. No. I actually don't recommend going through this way, but you can edit. When you save, you're going to provide your custom approval that process ID. So if you had it, well, let's just back up. Won't save. So let's search. So if you had, I don't know what type you would have, but I don't know, office check or something. So if you had a new approval type called office check, you would add that. When you saved, you could search for the approval, the name, and it would save that composition ID of office check. And so everything you made to that office check approval type would show up on your pending approval tile. So again, going back into absence management. Okay, where? Jeremy found it right. Oh, there we go. Need an extra set of eyes. He couldn't see it. I couldn't see it. So within here, the easier thing to actually do for approvals, instead of adding one on your own, because you'd have to walk through all of these, pull in the fluid approval component name, add all of these lines for the different sections that you would want to use. What I actually recommend is to use the copy composition option. And then that would give you the list of approval types or approval process IDs that you can leverage. So in that case, you would use office check. If then you would come in and you change any of the descriptions. Someone's got, is the feedback me or is the feedback someone else?
I think there's a train coming by and I'm trying to figure out how to mute my line.
Okay. Sorry about that. So if I wanted to change the name, this happens at registry time. I'm not going to change the name, but so all of these things as far as display type, right now we only support page. Eventually we do anticipate supporting just raw HTML that you could put into your own HTML area and emails. But for now, all of this is tied to the fluid approval component pages. So these are the page names. Again, definitely helpful from more of someone familiar with PeopleSoft development, to know how the page names are laid out. When you do a search, you could see the description, but we don't display the description here. And then the other thing is the form factor. So we do deliver small and extra large for our delivered transactions in most cases. I think there are a couple where we do just an extra large, but we opted not to do large and medium because it wasn't as prevalent, and it's just as easy to copy one of the others, small or extra large, as your starting point. Now, the next part of this was the key part of changing the application source record. So on the summary page, so again, kind of have to remember what page we're looking at. We're looking at the results page. I've got summaries line in 1 and 2. Let's see what I want to do here. We want to change. We want to look at the fields that are available. And so because this is on the main summary, I have the view that I've chosen, the alias. These are all of the key fields, and this just ensures that I get back the one row that I'm looking for. If you were doing like a time and labor grid, if you don't need all of the line keys, the line record keys, you just need the header record keys, and then we would iterate for as many lines as there happen to be, pending your approval or needing your review. You can change the any of the message set numbers if anything is more relevant to your business. The labels. If you here on the key field, it doesn't matter as much, but these would just be override labels that we would show as you're doing your selections. And then if you wanted to add an additional record, same, you give it whatever name you want to follow. So HTA, I don't know if I only have one. We don't really do a check, so I could, in theory, have two of the same views. I could call it HCR2, buffer level 2, and I'm just gonna, so I'd walk through and add all of these keys. And once I do this and save, I can go into my page composer layout page, which Jeremy showed earlier, and this new record with this alias HDR2. Actually, let's do it this way. If I were to call it SMA, so that's my initials, SMA. So if I did that as the alias, it would show up on the list as SMA. It would be available on the summary page and not any of the other detail pages. Not if I start saving, then I have to worry about all the errors and everything else that may happen. The other part here that's beneficial is, so by default, we added some support for combination of mass approvals and approvals, or the actions. So mass approval actions and actions. Those records are delivered by the Fluid Approval. Well, they're buttons within Page Composer, but the record is owned by the approvals team. And so what we've done is there's a there's a default action that we can support, which these buttons all map to different labels. I don't remember. I think it's approved, deny, pushback. They're all of the options are available. And then what we do is these are the actions we would take. In this case, I think it's just, submit mass approvals or mass action. They're all mass action, but based on the label name, we would pass in some additional controls. So if you had your own custom mass approval action, so that you needed to do a few other things before calling approvals, you could embed this into these button calls, and all of that people code would get executed when they clicked on the button. And the reason for making these buttons within Page Composer instead of leaving them on the Fluid Approval page was to reduce the number of places that had to be modified. And again, I don't necessarily want to save all of this, so I can kind of jump into the other piece. So Let's see, I think that's it about, well, the other types of objects are your images and links. That's where something here like the request or comments, typically we're storing this section as a link. So again, we're using the keys and we're allowing you, as you're laying the different objects down onto the page to, well, you're actually defining it here as a link. You're using the, let's see, I apologize. Seem a little distracted this morning, but the idea is, we support links, buttons, and images. So you would define those as EOPC different objects. They have like these EOPC L0A stands for a link. There's an EOPC button, or just different sets of objects, and that's what you would essentially leverage. And again, most of this, or nearly all of this, is in our people books or some of the different red papers that we published, and so they're all there to use. Now, without saving this page, I did want to go back to the page composer layout and just kind of talk through one more thing. So let's save, not save. So as Jeremy was pointing out about the layout, it is a real-time change. So definitely doing these things in a test environment and before moving to production is best. But from a header detail on assets management, that's why I preface that, because as soon as I start deleting these and save this, the next person that comes in, would not see any of the second column with what I'm about to do. So that's why, again, test environment. So you can do one of two things. Once you can do many things from a layout perspective, but what I wanted to show was I can add an additional column. So in this case, I added the third column, and since we don't care necessarily about the country, we're going to throw that into the box there. If you look at how I did my image for my disclaimer, this is how I have it. I don't necessarily want them in the first column. I now want them in the second column. So I know that it's the one thing we don't support is we don't support this. Well, actually, we don't support this. We need to discard it. And the other thing that we don't currently support within Fluid is dragging and dropping to a different position. So if you want to add something, it's got to always go to the bottom. If you don't like where it's at, you'll need to delete everything up to that point and then re-add. We've been looking at what to do as far as allowing the reshuffling of positions, but we've not been able to get everything that we need. Let's see, I add a disclaimer. And what matters is from my toolbox. So essentially, we're just taking the button field, and the image for the disclaimer. You can edit, you can link the two. And once I save, I did want to kind of make sure I left enough time for a few questions if we had any. So as soon as I save this page, if I want to now shrink to 2 columns, I have to delete all of the fields in the 3rd column before I can reduce. So I can always add, and if I change this to, say, 4 columns, I can reduce back down to 3 because there's nothing in that 4th column. But as soon as I add something to a column, I need to make sure it's empty before I delete it. So again, last thing here. One other thing to note from a technical side is that the styling, we do pick up the default tool style sheet, when we are rendering our page. So, as we change to this 858 styling of the light blue border and text with a blank, with a white background, those should get picked up. I think when we went out with 854, that was green. So those things do get picked up. You can apply your own style sheet. In that case, it will override specifically for where you set it to your style sheet. And if Tools does a modification and you wanted to revert back to that style sheet, you need to come in and clear your styles. So here, and trying to think what else I can share about the more of the technical side. Changing composition just allows you to change from absence to, say, time and labor. Changing form factor. By default, Tools drives the form factor size. And so if you're on a phone, we know to use a phone, but if you don't have the small form factor layout set up, we'll default to, I believe it defaults to the extra large right now because there isn't a large or a medium. But if you had, you could, I think, change those defaults. I don't remember what Tools allows or doesn't allow. And let's see, oh wait, I want to come back here. So while I finish rambling through this last bit, okay, I didn't have, yeah, you can see my icon. My image is not in the right spot, but because this is defined as a link, I can click on the link, and in this one, it just pops up a simple alert. These other links, so here's an example of a button. This button will run an AE program, and I think it returns an AE program. Yeah, it's an AE program that does a quick balance check to make sure that this number matches. Well, all right, because I'm looking at old data, that's where the problem is. But in current data, the balance would tell me, oh, you don't have enough balance to take this level of this many vacation days. And then this link, I believe, opens in. Some links within HCM or within FSCM open into a new window. So you can choose a variety of different options as far as what you want these links to do. And with that, like I said, I did want to make sure I left a little bit of time for questions. I don't know if any came up. That's high level, definitely what you can do from an administrative standpoint. There's still more we'd like to do. It's just waiting for different opportunities to take advantage of what's there.
Okay.
All right.
And we do have a question that came in, and just a quick reminder to everyone else, if you do have questions, please put those into the question drop-down box, and we will go ahead and take those. So I will go ahead with the first question. So is there any documentation that shows all the available objects with descriptions of what they are and which form, extra large, small, etc., they belong to?
So let's see. So the objects, let me go back and confirm, and then Jeremy and I can kind of come. There was a large set of data that we distributed. I know there was at least a red paper and some notes that came out when fluid approvals first came out. I just have to double check if all of those objects are still available and what their descriptions are. But as far as what's delivered, for the most part, the teams have done a decent job of giving the appropriate sections labels within the Page Composer Administrator page. So let me take a note to do that, to follow up.
Okay. And then the next question is, what image is the Page Composer available with?
Page Composer was made available in late 2016, early 2017, depending on each product. But so that was, I think, between the images 17 and 19, I believe, is when they first started rolling out. So there's, again, it will depend on if you're in financials versus HR versus ELM. The image, but so, sorry, step back. The image numbers are going to be different because of their schedule. But if you go back and look around 2016, 2017, that's around when everything was delivered.
Okay. And that is the last question that we had. So do you and Jeremy have any, oh, we actually had one just pop in. So can the approval chain be customized through Page Composer?
So customization as far as how it's laid out, or as far as adding approvers, the ability to add ad hoc approvers and reviewers doesn't change between how it was done in Classic versus Fluid. But as far as how it's rendered on this page, that's not currently flexible. It's still driven by the Fluid approval team.
Okay.
Taryn, can you give me a screen control? Because I have one slide just showing some other resources.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this is the last slide I'll show. Here, there is a spotlight video that Shawn did that you can see here. You can go to our YouTube channel or just Google YouTube and Page Composer, and you'll probably get it. There's also a video feature overview that's very short, that if you're just trying to show this to some people within your organization, just to get an idea of what this is, if you watch this. And then, of course, this presentation that we did today will be available to you through Quest and recorded, and Taryn can share with you how that's going to be exposed to everybody. And then, of course, here's my information. If you have questions that you weren't able to ask, you can always email me. And if there's something I can't answer, I can always get with Shawn and I can get the answer, and we can go back through Quest and we can make sure that everybody knows as well.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. And we really appreciate you guys coming and speaking with everyone today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And everyone have a great rest of their day.